This video is basically what happens when clutter, confidence, and zero shame share a driveway. We're going through 50 of the weirdest things Americans have tried to sell at garage sales, and some of them feel less like bargains and more like warnings. If a fact here genuinely hits you, use one of your 3 hypes on it while it still counts. 1. At one garage sale, someone had hung up a painting of a sad clown eating spaghetti, which was already weird before the close inspection made it worse. The noodles were real. Actual dried pasta had been glued onto the canvas strand by strand like a craft project made during a nervous breakdown. The title, written with total sincerity, was A Carb-Loaded Tragedy. That is not a painting, that is evidence. It looked like something you would find in a thrift store, stare at for 10 seconds, then slowly back away from while whispering, "No, this thing has seen too much." 2. Spread across a folding table was a carefully hand-drawn map of the whole neighborhood, but it did not show streets, houses, or anything a normal map should include. Instead, every mark showed where local cats like to sleep. Porch steps, warm car hoods, low fences, flower beds, all charted with the seriousness of military intelligence. The owner called it essential information for avoiding ambushes. That means this person was not just noticing neighborhood cats. He was tracking them like a man preparing for war. Somewhere between adorable and deeply concerning, it was the kind of item that made everyone laugh and then immediately look around for hidden cameras. 3. Leaning against a chair was a single giant fork, around 4 feet long, too large for dinner and too dramatic to ignore. Nobody could actually eat with it unless they were a giant or had a truly broken relationship with portion control. The man selling it claimed it was perfect for roasting marshmallows from a safe distance, which is already a sentence that should not exist. Then he added that it could also be used to menace your steak from across the room. So basically, it was part cooking tool, part social statement, part medieval threat. You do not buy a fork like that because you need it. You buy it because subtlety has failed you. 4. Somewhere between unnecessary gadget and garage-born genius sat the Soup Cooler 3000, a tiny hand-cranked fan on a stick meant to be aimed directly at a bowl of soup. The seller pitched it like a revolution, as if humanity had suffered for centuries waiting for someone brave enough to mechanize the act of not burning your tongue. Technically, it worked. Emotionally, it felt like a machine invented by a man who hated both patience and lungs. You had to crank it yourself, of course, which meant cooling lunch now required more effort than eating it. Nothing says progress quite like getting winded over chowder. 5. For $5, a man at one driveway sale promised a custom portrait finished in under 5 minutes. The catch was beautiful in its stupidity. He would only draw you as a potato. Not beside a potato, not inspired by one, but as a full potato version of yourself with your glasses, beard, hairstyle, or earrings added for accuracy. Imagine paying real money to discover your truest form is basically a root vegetable with attitude. People were actually lining up for it too, which says a lot about human vanity and even more about human curiosity. Dignity left the property early that morning, and business somehow improved. 6. A cardboard box sat on the edge of one table with a handwritten label that simply said, "Assorted lids." Inside were hundreds of random plastic lids in every possible size and color, yet not one matching container anywhere nearby. It was a box of pure kitchen heartbreak. Every person who opened it probably had the same tiny flash of hope, followed by the crushing realization that they were staring at somebody else's leftovers from a domestic battle nobody ever wins. The seller acted like it was useful, which is bold. Selling unmatched lids is like selling loose socks and calling it a wardrobe opportunity. Technically possible, spiritually offensive. 7. One seller had placed a small wooden box in the center of his table, and inside it sat a single button with a note attached. "Press it," the note said, "and absolutely nothing will happen." That was the product. No trick, no noise, no hidden joke afterward, just a physical object designed to deliver guaranteed disappointment. He described it as the concept of futility made tangible, which is either very funny or the opening line of a philosophy lecture nobody asked for. The worst part is that he had already sold 2 of them. So apparently people will pay for uselessness as long as it arrives with a smirk and a handmade label. 8. Lined up in a neat little stack were dozens of expired credit cards, all cut in half and arranged like tiny relics from old financial disasters. The owner called them vintage plastic art supplies and claimed crafters loved the retro logos and faded color schemes. That is one way to describe dead evidence of terrible spending habits. They could no longer buy anything, but as decorative reminders of interest rates, impulse purchases, and probably one regrettable leather couch, they had a strange kind of value. It was like looking at a scrapbook made by debt. No money left on them, but plenty of emotional residue. A museum of bad decisions in wallet size. 9. Sitting among the usual old lamps and chipped dishes was a beautiful antique music box that looked sweet, delicate, and completely harmless. Then someone wound it up. Instead of a lullaby, it screamed out the full dial-up internet sound from the late 1990s. Not a similar sound. The exact electronic shriek that once meant nobody could use the phone and your soul would leave your body before the web page loaded. It was less a music box and more a trauma device for anyone old enough to remember waiting 3 minutes to read one paragraph online. Cute on the outside, emotionally violent on the inside, like many things from that decade. 10. A row of old handsaws had been polished up and displayed in the sun, but not for cutting wood. Each blade had a peaceful landscape painted across it with rolling hills, quiet cabins, soft clouds, and cheerful little trees. The contrast was spectacular. One second you were admiring a lovely country scene, and the next you remembered it was painted on something designed to remove sections of forest by force. It looked like Bob Ross had collaborated with a slasher movie prop department. The effect was oddly beautiful and mildly threatening at the same time. Home decor for people who want their wall art to suggest both serenity and unresolved anger. 11. In the middle of totally normal garage sale junk sat a sealed mason jar labeled Authentic Hollywood Air. The seller swore he had captured it while working as an extra on the set of a Brad Pitt movie. And he told that story with the smooth confidence of a man who had absolutely tested it on strangers before. The problem was that it looked exactly like ordinary Ohio air, trapped in a jar, which is not exactly glamorous unless your standards collapsed years ago. But that was the beauty of it. You were not buying oxygen. You were buying proximity to celebrity fiction, bottled, sealed, and somehow priced at $5 like Fame had clearance stickers now. 12. One table featured a bright green fern with a handwritten sign calling it the amazing self-watering plant. That sounded impressive until you looked down and realized the fern was plastic and permanently sitting in a bucket of water. That was the whole secret. It could not die because it had never lived, which honestly makes it one of the most emotionally stable plants in America. The seller acted like this was a genius life hack for people who forget to water houseplants, but at that point, you are not gardening anymore. You are just staging fake responsibility in a corner of your living room and hoping nobody asks deeper questions. 13. At the end of one driveway sat an old rear projection television with a cracked screen and a handwritten label that did not say "broken." It said "Luxury Ant Farm." And somehow that was accurate. Inside the dead television was a full thriving ant civilization moving around like they had inherited a condo complex. Instead of pretending it still worked, the owner had simply rebranded the infestation as a feature and added a price tag. That is confidence, bordering on criminal optimism. Most people see bugs in a broken appliance and panic. This guy saw a business opportunity. Somewhere in there, the ants were probably paying rent and living more organized lives than half the neighborhood. 14. One armchair looked almost normal until you got close and noticed the seat cushion had been replaced by a full car tire. Not a tire print, not a rubber-style cushion, an actual tire jammed into the middle like comfort had been outlawed. The owner promised unbeatable lumbar support and a rugged aesthetic, which is salesman language for "I built this in a garage and refuse to apologize." It looked like furniture, designed for a man who wants to relax but also stay emotionally prepared for a drag race. There are chairs you sit in to unwind. This one looked like it might challenge your spine to a duel before letting you watch television. 15. A large cardboard box held nothing but left-handed mannequin hands. Dozens of them, all posed in slightly different gestures that somehow looked disapproving. Some pointed, some curled, Some hovered in a weird half-wave like they were judging your haircut, but trying to stay polite about it. The seller suggested using them as coat hooks, which is one option if your dream home style is haunted department store. They seemed less like decor and more like a silent jury waiting for you to explain your life choices. There is just something special about a pile of fake human hands that makes the entire yard sale feel one power outage away from becoming a horror film. 16. One inventor type proudly introduced what he called the ultimate universal remote. Then he lifted a long stick with a wad of duct tape wrapped around the end, sticky side out. That was it. According to him, it worked with any device you could physically reach and poke, which is technically true in the same way a shovel can be called a key if you are destructive enough. It was the kind of object that makes you laugh first, and then, annoyingly, admit the logic checks out. He had basically taken all the elegance out of technology and replaced it with caveman determination. Ugly, dumb, practical, unforgettable. A masterpiece of low expectations. 17. For $20, a man at one garage sale offered what he claimed was a genuine dog bark translator. After years of research, which one suspects mostly involves staring at confused pets, he had concluded that every bark translated into one of only 3 phrases: I am hungry, squirrel, or I am deeply disappointed in your life choices. The device itself looked homemade enough to start a house fire, but the theory had a weird ring of truth. Anyone who has ever made eye contact with a dog while eating junk food knows that last message is very real. Fake science? Definitely. Emotional accuracy? Disturbingly high. Honestly, it may have outperformed some real therapists. 18. A shoebox full of bread clips should not be memorable, yet this one had real serial killer energy. Hundreds of those tiny plastic tabs had been saved, sorted by color, and arranged with the care of a museum archive. White, blue, green, red, every last clip cataloged like evidence from a case nobody wanted reopened. The owner admitted he just could not throw them away, which is how harmless clutter quietly evolves into a lifestyle. One day you save a few. A few years later you are standing in a driveway explaining why loaf packaging deserves a classification system. At that point, you do not own a collection. The collection owns you. 19. One proud seller held up a television remote that had only one button left on it, and that button was volume up. He called it the no compromise remote and described it as the perfect way to end household arguments before they even start. That is less a gadget and more a passive-aggressive weapon for people who believe conflict resolution should involve louder commercials. It was hard not to admire the honesty. No fake promise of convenience, no nonsense about simplifying life, just one brutal function executed with total commitment. This was not designed for harmony. It was designed for the kind of living room where everyone is wrong and nobody plans to whisper about it. 20. A man stood beside a folding table insisting he was selling a genuine ghost detector, though the device in his hand looked suspiciously like a standard stud finder from any hardware store. To prove it worked, he pointed it at the garage wall until it beeped, and then announced with full seriousness that there was a spirit hiding in there right now. Apparently, ghosts now prefer drywall and structural beams. The funniest part was how little effort went into the scam. No flashing lights, no spooky sound effects, no fake scientific terms. Just a beeping tool and a straight face. Lazy fraud, yes, but delivered with the confidence of a televangelist. 21. One shopper thought he was buying a cool rock for $1, maybe a paperweight, or some random yard sale oddity to toss on a shelf. Later, after getting it tested, he found out it was a genuine chunk of raw uranium ore. Real radioactive material sitting casually near piles of romance novels, and old casserole dishes like that was a normal Saturday arrangement. Only a garage sale can turn bargain hunting into a minor nuclear event. Most people go home with a lamp or a waffle maker. This person went home with something that belongs in a lab and probably should not be living beside the family fruit bowl. America remains undefeated in chaos. 22. Someone had taken a perfectly good briefcase and attached a single rollerblade to the bottom, then marketed the result as the executive's last-mile solution. The idea was that a busy professional could glide the final stretch to a meeting with speed and style, which sounds incredible right up until you imagine a grown man in office clothes dragging a one-wheeled briefcase like he lost a bet with his accountant. It had the energy of an invention made by someone who thinks every problem can be solved by adding wheels and confidence. Practical? Not even a little. Memorable? Absolutely. Nothing says career ambition like almost wiping out in loafers outside a dental office. 23. A brand new solar-powered flashlight was sitting in its box, like a practical joke nobody had the courage to admit. A flashlight, by definition, is supposed to help when there is no light. This one needed bright sunshine first, which already felt like betrayal in product form. The seller made it even better by confessing he had never actually tested it. Every time he thought about trying, it was either cloudy or already dark, which is exactly when you would need a flashlight in the first place. So there it sat, a survival tool powered by good weather and optimism. Less emergency gear, more plastic proof that irony can be mass-produced. 24. Inside a plastic container with air holes sat a single enormous cockroach named Gregory, and the owner spoke about him with the gentle sincerity usually reserved for elderly dogs. He explained that Gregory was his best friend, but he was moving and could not take him along, so he just wanted him to go to a good home. That phrase alone should have ended civilization for the day. Gregory was not being sold as a pest, but as a companion with emotional value and probably opinions. Anyone who bought him was not purchasing a bug. They were assuming custody of a deeply confusing relationship. Somewhere out there, Gregory may still be disappointing houseguests. 25. One seller had what looked like an unbelievable find. A full-body C-3PO costume inspired by Star Wars, shiny enough to stop people in their tracks. Then came the detail that transformed it from cool to immortal. It had been custom-made for a dachshund. Not a child, not a tiny adult, a wiener dog. So now you are forced to picture a long little dog waddling around dressed as a nervous Golden Protocol droid. And frankly, that image is doing more for humanity than most elected officials. It was ridiculous, adorable, and somehow strangely majestic. Somewhere in the universe, a pet photographer saw that costume and nearly blacked out from opportunity. 26. Sitting among ordinary kitchen junk was a plastic container called the muffin topper, and its purpose was gloriously specific. Not for baking muffins, not for storing whole muffins, only the top part. The sweet, domed, slightly sticky crown people actually care about. The dry bottom half had effectively been written out of the Constitution. There was something ruthless and refreshing about that honesty. No pretending every part of the muffin matters. No fake respect for balance. Someone looked at a pastry and decided the best section deserved its own private real estate. Unnecessary, yes, but also suspiciously logical. This was not storage. It was baked goods elitism with a snap-on lid. 27. One man was selling a tiny clear acrylic box he called a mouse jail, designed to be placed over your computer mouse whenever you stepped away from your desk. He insisted it was essential for both data security and rodent containment, which is the kind of sentence that tells you this product was born during either deep boredom or a complete collapse in workplace trust. The idea was simple. Trap the mouse so it cannot escape, not metaphorically, literally. It looked like a prison for office equipment, and somehow had the polished seriousness of a real product. Completely unnecessary, obviously, but also weirdly satisfying in a world where even stationery feels one mood away from betrayal. 28. Sitting alone on a clean white cloth was a very expensive-looking dress shoe in size 14, and at first it seemed like a sad case of missing its partner. Then someone tried to lift it. The entire shoe had been filled solid with cement. No explanation, no matching pair, no emotional backstory, just one formal shoe transformed into a decorative brick. The best part was the handwritten sign beside it that said, "Your guess is as good as mine. Respect." Instead of inventing some fake artistic meaning, the seller chose pure mystery. It was not useful, not beautiful, not even especially stable. It was just a question disguised as footwear and priced like confidence. 29. One gallon-sized plastic bag was packed full of cat whiskers, all carefully collected and labeled as naturally shed and ethically sourced. That description somehow made the whole thing worse, because the moment you hear ethically sourced cat whiskers, Your brain starts wondering what the unethical version would look like, and nobody needs that horror movie. The seller seemed proud of the collection, like saving years of pet face fibers was an obvious and respectable hobby. It was one of those garage sale items that looked harmless on the surface but became more disturbing with every extra second of thought. You could not accuse it of being cruel, only deeply committed to being unbelievably weird. 30. Hanging from a tree was a wind chime made entirely from stolen hubcaps collected from different car brands, and it did not produce a nice gentle tinkling sound. It clanked like an alley fight happening in a scrapyard. The owner presented it as artistic yard decor, which is one way to describe decorating your home with probable evidence. Every gust of wind basically announced to the neighborhood that somewhere, someone had parked badly and paid the price. It was tacky, loud, and morally suspicious in a way almost impressive enough to respect. Most wind chimes say peaceful cottage life. This one said, I have stories and none of them end well for insurance companies. 31. One seller saved his best item for the end, a custom doorbell that did not ring at all. Instead, when someone pressed it, a hidden speaker let out a short, deeply disappointed sigh. Not angry, not cheerful, just the exhausted sound of a house that has already had enough of people. The owner claimed it was the perfect way to manage visitor expectations before opening the door. And honestly, that is more honest than most welcome mats. Why fake hospitality when you can greet delivery drivers with immediate emotional fatigue? It turned every arrival into a tiny personal rejection. Petty, theatrical, and strangely relatable. Somewhere, introverts were standing up and applauding in absolute silence. 32. Most sound machines try to sell you peace with fake rain, distant thunder, or some woodland nonsense involving birds that clearly have no jobs. This one had a single setting, refrigerator hum. Just that low, endless kitchen drone that usually lives in the background of midnight snacking and small domestic regrets. Somebody had isolated it, boxed it, and priced it at $10 like it was a premium relaxation experience. And the worst part is, it probably worked. There is something weirdly comforting about appliance noise, especially once life beats the romance out of silence. Finally, a sleep aid for people who trust compressors more than meditation and would rather dream near leftovers. 33. One tiny parachute for sale came with an explanation so specific it felt rehearsed from experience. The owner said it was designed for safely dropping your phone out of a second-story window. Not as a joke, not as art, as a real solution to a real problem he apparently believed adults encounter with some frequency. The little chute looked about as trustworthy as a paper napkin in a hurricane, and he did not offer a warranty, which was probably the smartest thing about the entire setup. This was not an invention for careful people. It was for the special breed of human who creates preventable disasters and then tries to engineer their way out of embarrassment. 34. On one table sat an ice cube tray with a truly insane level of commitment to regional pride. It made cubes shaped exactly like the state of Delaware. Not hearts, not spheres, not anything a sane bartender would request. Just tiny frozen Delawares ready to bob around in somebody's drink like a cold geography lesson. The item raised more questions than it answered, mainly who wanted this badly enough for it to exist in the first place. It felt custom-built for state fair gift shops, board history teachers, and the last few people willing to say I'm from Delaware with their full chest. Specificity like that deserves either applause or medical review. 35. Leaning against a tree at one sale was a single ski. Just one. Not a pair split up by tragedy, not a decorative set, just one lonely ski with a sign that said it was for the advanced skier seeking the ultimate challenge. Then, as if that was not enough, the sign added that it could also suit someone with one leg who loves snow. You have to admire the sheer range of that sales pitch. Instead of admitting the item was incomplete, the owner turned it into elite equipment and inclusive marketing at the same time. In America, even a missing ski can become motivational content if you put the sign up confidently enough. 36. One seller had a snow globe that ditched the usual fake snow and little cottage nonsense. Inside this one were water, glitter, and dozens of tiny plastic sharks. Shake it, and the whole thing turned into a personal little sharknado swirling in your hand like disaster had been reduced to gift shop size. It was tacky in the best possible way, the kind of object that does not ask for interpretation because it already knows exactly how stupid and wonderful it is. Most snow globes aim for peace. This one offered aquatic panic with sparkle. No subtlety, no restraint, just cheerful nonsense under glass. Frankly, more home decor should commit that hard. 37. A vintage toaster sat on one table with a handwritten sign that said only one word: haunted. That was enough to get attention. According to the seller, it toasted bread on one side and occasionally whispered something that sounded like Latin, which is either demonic possession or a wiring issue with theatrical instincts. For $5, you could take home a breakfast appliance that apparently doubled as an occult experience. The pitch was absurd, but not completely ineffective. There are people who would absolutely risk mild spiritual corruption for a decent slice of toast. That is the beauty of garage sales. Common sense leaves the property first, and curiosity soon follows holding cash. 38. One man had turned part of his life into a hostage situation by collecting more than 3,000 McDonald's Happy Meal toys from the early 1990s, every single one still sealed in its original bag. That alone was impressive. Then he refused to split the collection, which pushed it into madness. If you wanted one tiny plastic dinosaur, you now had to adopt an entire era of fast food nostalgia and probably explain yourself to at least 2 concerned relatives. The pile looked less like a hobby and more like a brightly colored monument to unresolved impulses. Somewhere, a storage unit was breathing heavily. Somewhere else, a divorce lawyer was preparing follow-up questions. 39. In the middle of a Texas yard stood a bright red British telephone booth, which would already be a strange thing to see outside a suburban fence. But the owner had not stopped at importing unnecessary drama. He had converted it into a fully working shower. That means every morning, someone could step into a narrow little red box and wash themselves while feeling like an international hostage. He called it the ultimate space saver. That is a charming way to describe bathing inside a vertical panic attack. Stylish? Sure. Practical? Only if your dream bathroom combines London tourism, claustrophobia, and the constant fear of elbowing the wall while shampooing. 40. One large box was filled with what the seller called pre-disappointed fortune cookies. And for once, the advertising was honest. Instead of hopeful little messages about success or romance, the fortune said things like, "An exciting journey will be canceled. You will continue to be you." And that was not chicken. It was bleak, sharp, and weirdly refreshing. Finally, fortune cookies for people who have already dealt with airlines, family drama, and customer service hotlines. There was no fake optimism here, just crunchy realism wrapped in sugar and irony. Somewhere between depression and comedy, someone had created the perfect dessert for adults who no longer need lies with their takeout. 41. Hanging from a tree was what the owner confidently called an industrial chic chandelier. Everybody else saw an old car tire spray-painted gold with Christmas lights woven through it like a festive wiring accident. It had the exact energy of a person who watched one home makeover show, learned the phrase statement piece, and immediately became dangerous. Still, you could not accuse it of lacking ambition. It was not merely ugly. It was aggressively committed. One bad extension cord away from becoming a neighborhood legend, the thing managed to be decor, a fire hazard, and a cry for artistic recognition all at once. Even the tree looked uneasy supporting it. 42. One seller introduced a tiny low stool called the sock chair, with a straight face and the confidence of a man who thought he had changed civilization. Along the sides were special grooves meant to hold your socks open while you slid your feet in, solving a problem so minor that most people had never even considered it a problem at all. It was a whole piece of furniture dedicated to reducing the difficulty of getting dressed from very low to slightly lower. You almost had to respect the commitment. This was not laziness anymore. This was specialized domestic engineering for people who wanted their morning routine to feel like a product demo. 43. A whispering man at one garage sale claimed he was selling X-ray binoculars because apparently everything sounds more believable if it is said like a secret. To prove they worked, he stared through a solid wooden fence and correctly announced there was a dog on the other side. The only issue was that the dog was barking loudly enough to remove all mystery from the demonstration. That was the entire pitch. No science, no hidden trick, just a cheap pair of lenses and a level of confidence normally associated with game show hosts and cult leaders. It was the purest form of lazy scam artistry. Minimal effort, maximum nerve, and just enough nonsense to tempt the curious. 44. One table held a 5-pound bag containing nothing but those chalky conversation hearts from Valentine candy. The little pastel tablets that taste like sweetened drywall and emotional misunderstanding. The seller claimed he had spent years picking them out by hand from mixed candy packs, which means this was either a business venture or a cry for help wearing a price tag. There was something almost heroic about that level of pointless dedication. Nobody wakes up by accident with 5 pounds of romantic chalk. You build toward that. The result looked like a prop from a sad wedding reception, and somehow that made it even harder to stop staring at it. 45. Somebody was selling a 4-drawer filing cabinet that looked ordinary until you opened it and found every drawer packed with instruction manuals from every appliance he had ever owned. Microwaves, blenders, fans, lawn tools, alarm clocks, even the stuff that had broken decades earlier was still documented and filed, like future generations might need answers. It was not furniture anymore. It was a shrine to preparedness bordering on domestic paranoia. Most people throw manuals away the second the toaster works once. This man had apparently prepared for a future in which society collapses, and the only surviving wisdom is the setup guide for a bread maker from 1992. 46. Instead of selling a full car, one man had taken a 1998 Toyota Corolla, sawed it cleanly in half, and offered only the front section for sale. He insisted it would make the ultimate conversation starter in a man cave, which is true in the same way a live bear would also start conversation. The thing looked like it had been interrupted mid-escape from reality. There was no practical use for it unless your decorating style is unresolved accident scene. Still, you could not deny the spectacle. Parking becomes easier when half the vehicle is gone, and explaining ownership becomes much, much harder. It was absurd commitment turned into interior design. 47. One apocalypse enthusiast had placed an enormous glass jar on his table, and inside were hundreds of plastic sporks packed together like sacred relics from the cafeteria age. He spoke about them the way survivalists talk about water filters or ammunition. In his mind, the spork was the perfect utensil, a glorious compromise between stabbing and scooping that would separate the prepared from the doomed when civilization finally collapsed. Ridiculous. Completely. But also weirdly hard to argue with. Gold will not help you eat canned beans in the dark. This man understood that. When the world ends, he may not have dignity left, but he will absolutely have a functional plan for chili. 48. Someone was selling half-used cans of wall paint scented to smell like the inside of a brand new Toyota. Because apparently there are people who experience new car smell and think, yes, let us trap this in the house forever. The seller admitted he had stopped using it because the chemical odor was driving everyone in the home a little insane, which feels like a reasonable side effect when your dining room starts smelling like a dealership office with no windows. There is something deeply American about trying to turn financed upholstery into a lifestyle. Why make your home cozy when you can make it feel like you are forever one signature away from a 5-year payment plan? 49. In Florida, a man was selling an ordinary cooler for $10, which sounded harmless until a buyer flipped it open to inspect the inside. Instead of melted ice or old soda cans, there was a very live, very angry alligator staring back like customer service had finally snapped. The seller barely reacted. He just shrugged, said he forgot the alligator was in there, and casually added that the gator would cost extra. That is not a sentence, that is a regional diagnosis. Only in a garage sale can checking the condition of a cooler turn into a reptile negotiation with surprise pricing and a strong chance of losing a hand over something marked bargain. 50. For $50, one seller offered a beautifully framed diploma from the University of Wikipedia, printed with enough formal design and fake authority to fool anyone standing at a respectful distance. The fine print explained it was for novelty purposes only, which is legal language for please do not diagnose anyone using this. Still, the thing had charm. It captured the dream of getting status without tuition, expertise without exams, and a prestigious title earned entirely through late-night internet wandering and dangerous confidence. In a way, it was the perfect modern diploma. Not because it meant anything, but because a shocking number of people now act like it should. Now pick your problem. Which item would you actually bring home, and which one should be banned from human circulation forever? Put both in the comments, not one. Both. Like the video and subscribe if you want the kind of lists that drag the weirdest corners of America into the light. And if you still have one of your 3 hypes left this week, this is exactly what it should be spent on.